Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. Now, the brand San Martin has become known as one of the best brands of watches to buy on AliExpress. And this watch that I'm going to review today has been very successful due to its nice balance between quality, price, looks, and the watch that it is actually homaging as well is quite a popular vintage watch. So the watch that I'm reviewing today is the San Martin SN004G, otherwise known as the Water Ghost, or the 6200 Vintage Water Ghost. And it's obviously very heavily inspired by an old vintage Rolex. You'll see this one here. When you put the watch next to it, you can think, oh yeah, that's definitely where they got those styling cues from. Thankfully, when putting this watch together, they decided to resize it, make it a little bit bigger than the vintage style smaller watches of that time. And that has created a watch that is much more modern and much more contemporary for today's watch wearers. This is my first experience and first ownership of a San Martin watch, and I have to say I'm rather impressed. For the cost of the watch, it is very good. And if this watch represents what this company's watches are normally like, then I'm guaranteed to be buying more watches from them. But let's flip the camera around now and I'm going to give you a full review. Now, you do need to be aware this review is probably slightly longer than my normal ones because I had quite a bit to say. But let's flip the camera around and get on with it. Now the watch comes in this really nice solid packaging. As I mentioned in my first impression video, the packaging is actually a little bit smaller than I expected when you look at other videos of the watch, but it certainly does the job. You can certainly feel secure that the watch is going to arrive safe. Now it does come with a bunch of little bits and pieces. It comes with a warranty card. It comes with this NATO strap that I won't be using. I'm not really a big NATO fan. It comes with a little user manual, hang tag, 2 spare links that I took out of it. And that's worth noting just here and now. I have a 6 3/4 inch wrist and I only took 2 links out. So if you're a big wristed person, keep that in mind. It comes with some spare spring bars. Comes with the tools that you need to actually undo and modify this bracelet. You need the screwdrivers from either side, and it comes with this little bit of Loctite which you're meant to use on the screws. So let's check out the dimensions of the watch, shall we? The case is 38mm, however the bezel overhangs the case by a little bit, effectively making it look and feel like a 39mm. It is 13mm thick. The lug to lug is 46mm. However, as you can see, those male end links of the bracelet makes the effective lug to lug size 52.5mm. This additional size also gives the watch a little bit more of presence on the wrist. The lug width itself is 20mm, and size to my 6 3/4 inch wrist, it weighs in at 132 grams. Now the hands, the dial, the bezel, the case shape, all do mimic that Rolex quite well. But as I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit larger than the Rolex, and I'm glad they did so because it gives a little bit more of a modern feel to it. The dial is a matte black with a printed minute track in a golden yellow Fotina type colour. There is a printed inverted triangle at the 12 o'clock, printed batons at the 6, 3 and 9, with printed dots on the other hour marks. The text is printed in the same colour, with San Martin in a cursive script at the 12 o'clock and 200 metres, 660 feet automatic at the 6 o'clock. All the hands are a golden colour and polished, the hour hand being a Mercedes style, the minute hand being a pencil style, and the second hand having both a lollipop on the end and a similar smaller counterbalance. This is all covered by a piece of domed sapphire crystal with AR coating. The lume is very good, and as you can see it's on both hands, on that lollipop second hand, on all the hour markers, and on that little pip on top of the bezel. The bezel insert is that black glossy ceramic look. All those markings are etched into the ceramic itself, and they're coloured to match those hands and those indices. On the top, on that little lume pip, it is set inside of a little piece of golden coloured steel. The action on the bezel itself is very, very good, very crisp, very clean. There's absolutely zero backplay whatsoever and no movement. The sound and the feel of this bezel reminds me a lot of my Longines watch, which is a lot more expensive than this watch, so it's very good to get such good action at this price. Now, speaking of prices, I paid 300 Australian dollars for this watch. It was on special from the AliExpress store and normally retails for around about the $330. The crown displays that little shark, which is well known by San Martin fans as the little diver shark on their dive watches. It is a screw down crown. It has a very nice action. You can hear slightly as you wind up, but it's very smooth. It's powered by a NH35 Seiko movement, which of course means it has hacking and hand winding, but it also means that it has a ghost date position. I have to say it's a little bit disappointing having a ghost position. However, on this particular watch, it doesn't seem to make any difference because this particular NH35 is running less than a second a day fast, so I've not had to change the watch time since owning it. So speaking of that NH35, let's stick this on the time grapher and see if my observations of that 1 second a day is what the time grapher reflects as well. So as you can see here, it is a 21,600 vibrations per hour, minimal beat error. It has a reasonable amplitude, and it's talking about +5 to +6 seconds a day. However, in real life, I've been wearing this every day for about a month, and it is gaining less than 1 second per day. So it's actually interesting to see the difference of what the time grapher says to what the reality of what the watch wears like. I do have to say that the brushing on this watch is done very well. It has vertical brushing on the top of the case, which then matches in very nicely with the bracelet. It has horizontal brushing along the case, and as you can see, it's actually quite thin. You're looking at about a 5mm case thickness, and it also curves down a little bit at both edges. You'll see on the lug there is a chamfered edge, which is high polished, which starts off relatively wide. It moves into the center and goes thin, and then comes back out again on the other side of the lug as wide again. It's just a very nice touch, which gives the watch just a little bit of something. The stainless steel screw down case back is very simple and works very well with this style of watch, as it matches in with the type of watch that it is mimicking. And then there is this bracelet, which is so good that it really could occupy a video all by itself. It starts off at those 20-meter lug width and it tapers down to 16.5, but if you measure it from the edges of these little rivets here, it measures at 18mm, which fits in perfectly with the 18mm clasp. So it really gives that nice flowing effect from bracelet through to clasp. The end links are of course solid and they fit very well to the watch. There is absolutely no movement whatsoever. The bracelet is brushed throughout with these high polished little plates on the side of it. It has these little rivet looking things and little screws that are on to adjust the bracelet. To adjust the bracelet, you need 2 screwdrivers, one from each side, to unscrew it. And using the tools that come with it really make this job a lot easier. The clasp is also brushed and fits in very nicely with the bracelet. It has the San Martin logo, which is quite nice and soft to the touch, which is quite good. A lot of these laser engraved logos tend to be a little bit sharp. It has a double pusher, and of course it is a milled clasp. It comes with 4 micro adjusts, and this is what it looks like on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. Even with those male end links, it fits really well. In fact, I think it actually makes it fit better and give me more wrist presence. Having those slightly curved base to the case, it also then fits and hugs onto your wrist quite nicely. I do sometimes wear it a little bit forward as well, which also looks quite good. I can honestly say that I pretty much like everything about this watch. The look of it, the finish, the size, especially that bracelet, everything. But if I was to be a little bit picky, there's probably a few things worth pointing out that I would love to possibly change or improve slightly. And firstly, it's that bezel edge. Along the top, it is a little bit sharp feeling. You do really notice it when you're moving the bezel. It has a slight sharpness to your fingers. It would be certainly nicer if they softened that off somewhat. Now it does have this AR coating, which for me, I personally don't mind at all. I think it looks alright, but I have noticed on some of these watch forums, people do complain about it a little bit, thinking that it doesn't suit this watch. Now for me, even though they are mimicking the Rolex, this little lollipop end to the second hand, I think it's a little bit too big. I'd love to see it if they shrunk it down just a little bit. I think it would suit this watch face a little bit better. Also, as I mentioned, it does have these male end links, which, as I've mentioned, I actually quite like. It gives the watch better wrist presence, but there are certain people that have been complaining about this again on the watch forums, and perhaps that's because they have smaller wrists, or perhaps they just like female end links on all their watches. Also, because of those male end links, when it does sit on your wrist, you do tend to see the end of that bracelet there, and you'll see that just like that, it doesn't seem to really integrate perfectly into the end. If you had much larger wrists and that bracelet was pulled out a lot more, then you wouldn't see that. But when I wear it, you do tend to look down and see those ends a little bit. For me, it doesn't bother me too much, but it would have been nice to see that integrate a little bit more into those end links. Now, putting aside the fact that sizing this bracelet with those little screws is a little bit tricky, the concerning thing I had was when picking the amount of links to leave in it. Initially, I had one less link, and I used the outermost micro adjust, but that felt just a little bit too small for me. So I put a link back in, and I now use one of the most innermost micro adjusts. And it does fit fine, but sometimes it just feels a little bit loose. So it probably would have been nice to have maybe one more micro adjust. So that's my review of my little San Martin. But let's flip the camera around now, and I'll give you some of my final thoughts. So at the end of that part of the review, it sounds like I've mentioned quite a few negatives, but I do want to make it very clear that they are very minor negatives. I was really nitpicking slightly, and that this overall is an amazing watch that I'm very happy that I purchased. But as a reviewer, I really wanted to give you those details about the watch, both good and bad, so that you can make a good choice whether you want to purchase this one as well. But as a watch reviewer, I really wanted to point out all those little good and bad features of the watch so that you can make a good choice about whether you want to buy this watch or not. If you do decide to buy this watch, I have to say I think you are going to be pleased, and I think it is great value for money. And I have to say that I have been wearing this watch a lot. And that is not just because I was coming up for this review of the watch. I've been going to my watch box and picking it up over the top of any of the other watches that I have in there. And I've got some lovely watches in that watch box. If you've gotten to this point in the review, I really appreciate you hanging around. I know it's a little bit longer than the normal ones. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you did so. It makes a big difference to this channel. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. I hope to see you in another video. See you later.